You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Cynthia Toolin-Wilson, and I'm here with Dr. Ronda Chervin on our show, The Dynamic Duo. And tonight, we're going to be having a very interesting talk about how it is that we decided to do the professions that we did get into. So it promises to be an interesting conversation. So, and how are you tonight, Rhonda?
Okay, I want to say a prayer. I am so grateful. Dear Jesus, I am so grateful for my profession and all the truth that I got through studying philosophy and teaching philosophy and writing philosophy books. Mm-hmm. And I just thank you for that. And I thank you for the wisdom that I get from people in other professions in the academic world, such as Cynthia Toolin, degree in sociology as well as in theology. And so as we share today, we will encourage any listeners to follow the Holy Spirit into fruitful activity. Amen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. You know, it is interesting how you learn so much from people with different disciplines. Like I've learned a lot from the philosophers that I worked with. And, you know, there were a couple of historians, like Father Fluitt, you know, and he gave me very different perspectives on some of the historical events of the world in Christianity. So it is nice to have, you know, some of your peers being in different disciplines. So what exactly did you learn from me from sociology? I'm curious about that.
Okay. No, I want to challenge you to tell me more during these dialogues, which I hope will go on for a long time, because what happened to me is when I was trying to, I had no idea what I wanted to major in. So the advisor, this was at City College in New York City, the advisor said, well, take many subjects and see which one you like. So I took a sociology course, and the only thing I remember has stuck with me forever, which is the idea of what's called cultural survivals. It goes this way, that there can be something that we do or words that we say which don't relate to reality now, but relate to some archetypal thing in the past which survives the end of that actuality. And the example that was given was that for decades and decades, maybe even a century, the motor had to always be in the front of the car because that was where the horse's head was in the front. See?
Yeah, now, I see. That's a good point.
The example that I have that I get annoyed at these things totally irrationally, but anything that someone says, which is a cultural survival, for example, everything you send is being shipped. Well, almost nothing is shipped. Almost everything goes by airplane. So almost nothing is shipped. So every time they say, here's where we will ship this item, I get annoyed, which is ridiculous, but that's what it is, a cult. So that explains it. The other one, which drives me crazy, and my poor hostess, my dear friend Marty, who is hosting me all this time, she uses the word pocketbook where I would use the word bag. And I always think to myself, okay, the pocketbook, it's not a pocket and it's not a book. So why is it called pocketbook? Well, it's a survival from when people carried a little book in their pocket in a sack. See? And so that's the only thing I remember from sociology. So I'm hoping to learn more from you from sociology just through this program. So why don't you talk about how you got into sociology?
Hmm. Well, it's kind of interesting because I originally wanted to be an anthropologist. I had fallen in love with Margaret Mead's work, and she was quite the anthropologist. And so I wanted to do that. But then I found out that in anthropology, there's all these different subfields, and some of them involve going out and digging in the dirt. And I mean, obviously, I know now that that's not all of them. But I thought, nope, not going to dig in the dirt. So I chose sociology. And I really, to this day, I love it. It has served me well. Overall, there are two kinds of sociologists. There are either those who do qualitative work, where they sort of sit around with other people and observe and write about what they observe and the social structures. I, on the other hand, went for the statistical method, where you do opinion surveys and that kind of thing. And that served me well, as you know, when I worked for the church at Holy Apostles, because I did all of the statistical reporting for years. I was their statistician. And it enabled me also to work at Pontifex University now because I do some of their statistics for them. So, so I find that a statistical analysis when you're doing sociology is very interesting because it shows you what the trends are, so you can ask opinion surveys, that kind of thing, but you can also see how many women are working in a different kind of occupation now than they would have been, say, 10 years ago. So you can mark trends. So it's interesting work. But it's actually because of sociology that I started to become, I didn't convert because of sociology, but it started to make me interested in religion. So I worked with a man, Wade Clark Roof, who is a very famous sociologist. So what I found interesting about sociology, again, was the trending things, and finding out how things changed over time. But I worked with this man, Wade Clark Roof, who was at the time a very famous sociologist of religion. So I ended up working with him and getting my MA in theology. And I had also worked in the area of criminology. So in sociology, it's not unusual to have two fields. So I was doing criminology, and I said one day to myself, what is it that is wrong with people that they do the terrible things they do to each other? I mean, some woman will just be walking down the street, minding her own business, had to go to the grocery store, and she'll get gang raped, something like that. And it's like, I'm looking at the criminal statistics and it's like, what is wrong with people? To this day, I probably ask myself that question 5 times a day. But when I was studying sociology of religion, there was also this whole aspect of evil that, some people believe in it and some people don't. I don't know how you could not believe in it. And then when I started to hang around the Catholic Church, I heard about original sin. And the 3 things came together like an explosion in my brain. Original sin, evil, and criminology. So I could see how bad people treat each other, and I never understood why. And then all of a sudden I realized that the answer to that question was in religion with original sin. And I thought, wow.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah. I still can remember, I literally went like, wow, how did I not see that before? Of course, I'd never heard of original sin before, so that's part of the reason I never thought of it. But, so even before I became Catholic, I started to understand much more about the universe, not just about society, because I started to understand that there are forces of good and forces of evil in the universe, not just in the community. And, the community is nothing more than a little mirror of what's going on at that greater level. So sociology served me well. It got me to look at this issue of evil. It certainly provided me with a good income for many years. So That's how I got into it.
That's so different because I was brought up to only see and appreciate evil because evil was interesting and good was considered bourgeois conventionality.
Yeah.
So that's an opposite take. I found
Yeah.
that I found goodness through religion, which I had never thought existed.
Mhm.
I have a funny story about original sin. Is when
Mhm.
my twins were born, I thought they were angels. And then one day they were in the playpen, and the older one, Carla, was the first to stand up by herself,
Mhm.
and everyone was clapping for her. And Diana was so jealous, she pulled out Carla's hair. And then I said, oh, now I understand original sin. Even babies could have original sin.
Oh, they sure do. They sure do. We all do from the minute we're conceived. But yeah, it is. It's interesting when you learn about these things after you realize something is wrong.
Right.
And I realized this really, because there's just no reason. People get killed, they get hurt, things get stolen, and people have done nothing wrong, but all of a sudden things go wrong, and it's because other people are bad. And I couldn't understand that until I heard about original sin. Of course, later I found out about personal sin and social structures of sin. Sin is powerful.
Oh, sure, sure.
Very powerful.
Yeah, St. Peter says the devil, like a roaring lion, is running around seeking someone to devour.
Yes. Yeah. And I think he devours people pretty regularly. So
I had an interesting way of getting into philosophy. The first philosophical question I ever had was way before I knew there was such a subject. In junior high school, we were supposed to write compositions on what you want to be when you grow up. And I actually wrote, the first sentence of my composition was, how can I know what I want to be if I don't know the meaning of life? And the teacher was so impressed that she gave me an A+ on the little paper. So it stuck in my mind. So then I get to school and I'm trying to figure out, so I'm taking these different courses and I can't, all of them are disappointing. So I thought the joke was that I was going to be a Philadelphia lawyer because I was always arguing. And so I take a course in government and I keep asking, I don't want to hear about all these different kinds of governments. I want to think about why you need government at all. Then I take a psychology course, and there was statistics, which you liked, but I didn't like. And I wanted to know, sort of ideas about psychoanalysis, but it was statistics, so I was disappointed. And so on and so forth. Oh, I took literature because I was always a great reader. And we start out with, English literature starts with Chaucer, and I didn't understand a word. I've never been good at poetry, so I didn't understand it too well. So then there was only one course left that I hadn't tried, which was philosophy. And the minute I got into my first philosophy class, I was delighted. Here was what I had always been doing without having a name for it, is trying to find out the truth of everything.
Yeah.
So I went on in philosophy, but I was very disappointed because every place I studied, they were skeptics, the teachers. They didn't believe in truth. So the way I like to put it is the mind is not a light to find truth. The mind in secular philosophy or non-religious philosophy, the mind is like a knife to chop up everybody else's theory, but you never reach truth. So by graduate school, I was completely disillusioned. I couldn't find truth and I couldn't find love through love affairs because I was immoral. And so I was thinking, why live? if you can't find love or truth and you just suffer, why live? And that's when I met by miracle these wonderful Catholic philosophers. And so then that's Alice and Dietrich von Hildebrand. And then I started studying Catholic philosophy. And I just loved it because they could refute skepticism in one paragraph. I just couldn't believe it. And also, the teachers who were teaching me philosophy, most of them were what I would describe as desiccated academics, very bloodless and, not exciting. And here were these 60-year-old professors full of joy and energy because they had the truth. See? They're just fantastic. However, I didn't want to teach philosophy myself. I didn't know what I would do with philosophy because I didn't want to teach for this funny reason. I remembered that in every class, I was always the student who sits in the front row and holds her hand up every minute contradicting the teacher. So I decided I don't want to be on the other side of that. So I didn't think I would like teaching. But the first moment I tried, which was in a very unusual first job, which is one course, because I was married with children by then, one course at the Marine base in California. And I was sitting at a desk with an enormous gun on the desk, pointing at the students. And it happened that one of the officers was in the class. So the students were so good because this officer was there watching them. So that was a very unusual course. But then I started teaching full-time at the Catholic University, Loyola Marymount University. So over to you.
Over to me. So, so what happened is I converted in 1989 because of a religious experience. And do you want me to repeat that story? I think I've already said that on here.
Yeah, I think you should go on. You did it. If anyone's interested, go back to the first of these. This is the third.
Yeah, so I converted due to a religious experience in Rome. I was there because my husband wanted to take his mother. She was 85, wanted to take her to Rome because she'd always wanted to go there. So when I came back, I decided to convert, and I converted with a wonderful priest who had actually taught at Holy Apostles. And he sent me there to study, and the rector said that he would hire me after I took 90. I had taken 90 credit MA there. And then I can't get over that. That was 30 courses. When I was young, I was ambitious. So I took the 30 courses, I got the MA, and he sent the rector, Father Mosey, said, go to a Dominican house and get a license, and when you come back, I will hire you as a professor. And he kept his word, which is good.
So how did you do that? That was before online, wasn't it? How did you do that if you were married with children?
The kids were already grown. So we went, Jimmy and I. Jimmy was already declining. And so he said that he could sit in the living room at the house, at our house, or the condo actually, and watch TV. Or he could sit in the living room of our camper in Washington and watch TV. So we rented the condo out to one of my daughter's friends and my daughter Susan. And then we went to Washington for 2 years. And when I got finished with the licentiate, Father Mosey did hire me. And I worked there for 28 years. And left last October, left at the end of last September.
Fantastic. Terrific. Well, okay. So mine was a little different. I had twin daughters, and it's a long story, which I don't want to tell now. But in any case, I was in the middle of my PhD when I got married and had little babies. And it's hard to imagine for anyone who doesn't know philosophers well what it's like for a philosopher to try to deal with the physical needs of little babies in the form that my funny story was, which is a true story. They would be sitting in their high chairs, my twin daughters, 2-year-olds, throwing food on the floor, and I would be sitting thinking, are table manners moral absolutes, or are they only conventions? So you can imagine how well I trained them. So Alice von Hildebrand, who I was telling about this, she said, get a nanny and finish your degree. Well, I didn't get a nanny, but I got a terrific fellowship. There was a fellowship called the Danforth Fellowship for women who wanted, after having families, to go back and finish their degrees. They paid all my expenses. Mm-hmm. So I could get a babysitter while I finished my coursework and got my thesis done. Mm-hmm. And happily, I was able to write this thesis in 1 year for this wonderful reason, 2 reasons. One is it happened at that school, Fordham University, that they had a new professor who was a Methodist philosopher, and he had never supervised a thesis. So he told me this wonderful way to do it. He said, instead of doing all the meticulous research, write out all your ideas. And then when you have all your ideas written, then stick in footnotes to match. Mm. So since I was writing this thesis when my little girls were 4 years old, and the way I did it was I put them to bed early at 7 o'clock into their cribs, and then I worked for hours in the evening on the thesis. The other very good thing was it happened, the thesis was on Kierkegaard, the famous Lutheran philosopher, and I thought I had to have a whole historical section and have a whole thing on Hegel, who I had never understood, because Kierkegaard was an enormous opponent of Hegel. So I ordered in the entire complete works of Hegel to read, while the kids were in the playpen. But just before I was about to begin, I saw the head of the department at Fordham, and he was a neo-Thomistic Hegelian.
Oh, dear.
And he knew me very well. So when I said I was going to do this research, he said, Rhonda, you'll never understand it. Forget it. Skip that section altogether. So that shortened the whole thesis by a year, probably, a year. So in 1 year, I got the thesis written and got it defended. Mm-hmm. And that was, so that's very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first master's took me 3 years, because I had to have, 10 courses, and then I had to write the thesis. And so maybe it was 2.5 years. And that was a long time at that point, because I was still young, and when you're young, you just kind of expect to be able to go through things, with a good pace. But I learned a lot in it. So.
Mm-hmm. So how will you describe yourself as a theologian? Do you belong to some specific school of theology, or how do you describe your way of teaching theology? Or what did you write your thesis on in theology?
I actually, the one at my licentiate, I was doing a statistical analysis of people who go to church. It was looking at Hispanics. So I've always been very interested in Hispanic ministry because, when you look at this group, so many are starting to leave and become Protestant. And these were really strong Catholics, 20 years ago. And there still are many who are, but I was doing more of a social analysis, statistical. But if you were to say, what kind of a theologian am I? My major interest is Catholic social teaching, because of course I was a sociologist, and it still fascinates me. Because, the topics just don't end. I would include marriage and family within that. The environment. Who would ever think that one of the popes would talk about the environment? Francis did. So Catholic social teaching. But when I'm teaching dogma, I use the Summa.
Thomas. Okay.
Yeah. So for Trinity and Christology, I use the Summa. I haven't, of course, I don't teach that much anymore at Holy Apostles. If I do Catholic social teaching, I use the magisterial documents.
Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a complete change in how I wanted to teach when I first started teaching. I wasn't going to teach. I was only going to teach one course now and then because I had 3 children by then. And I thought that women should stay at home and just, if they had degrees, I should just teach one course now and then. But my husband became deathly ill with asthma from smoking 3 packs of cigarettes all his life a day. And so he couldn't work anymore. So I had to look for it. In those days, we never thought if we were middle class that we could go on welfare. Something. So the idea was to look for a full-time job. And I got this wonderful job for this interesting reason, because it happened that the chairman of the department was a fan of Edith Stein, the famous Jewish convert Catholic philosopher, Edith Stein. And Edith Stein was a friend of von Hildebrand. So when I came walking in, he said, "This is the new Edith Stein. I can hire her for my department."
Yeah.
So I was thinking I would teach the wonderful books that I had read that I loved. Well, the first time I came into a class, I think I should stop and get my hostess is talking loud on another phone.
Okay.
I can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll move. Sorry. She's on the phone. Big phone. Scott, that's okay. I'm just moving. I'm going outside. Sorry, Sebastian. You can cut that out. Okay. So the very first day of my first class was an intro to philosophy class, and I started giving them the book list and all these kind of things and telling them what I'm going to do. And this young man came walking into my office immediately after the first class, and he said, "Dr. Ronda, don't tell me you're going to plan exactly what you're going to do without even knowing what we're like." So he was this sort of semi-hippie character. And I cried all the way back home. I had an hour's commute. And I cried all the way back home thinking I'm a failure after one day. But then I started thinking about it. And so I changed the whole way I taught things to try to relate to the existential situation of my students. So instead of thinking of them as just minds, I saw that these students, their strange their strange situation was this, that they're freshmen, they've just left home, nobody is forcing them to go to mass anymore. There are these parties all the time and sports. It's a big basketball school.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're having a ball. So they're escaping from Catholic teaching, see? And here I come in with, as if they were all strong, believing students.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, everything I taught from that day, and that student became a disciple of mine for years, actually, and so did his whole little gang of students, is because I would try to figure out how to describe things so that they would get it. So, for instance, instead of talking about the marvelous beauty of the Eucharist and what the real presence is, I would say, hey, suppose you were dating someone and they never want to see you on Saturday. Wouldn't you think there's something wrong with that? So what do you think Jesus feels Sunday is for people to be able to go to church and you're not there? What does that mean? And stuff like that. Or, would you like to just hear words from the person you're in love with, but they never want to get close to you physically? And so on and so forth. So my whole writing career was based on that initial rejection of what I was planning to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not the truths of what I was planning to do, but the methodology was going to be, you just memorize the text. Here's the textbook, it's truth. Just memorize it and come back and take tests.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Well, as we go through life, a lot of times we have experiences like that point out that there's a better way of doing something. But if you didn't have the experiences, you'd never know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, now you're much younger than I'm 86, you're in your 70s. But when you look back and you're 86, it's just remarkable how many surprises there were in your life that were fruitful surprises. Yeah. The Holy Spirit just twisted around your expectations.
Yeah, well, I'm 73, so I'm not that much younger than you. But I hope I'm in as good a shape as you are if I ever reach your age. You're still teaching, you're still full of energy, you're still full of life. You're lucky.
I guess so. Yes. It doesn't feel that way inside.
Well,
I feel decrepit.
You feel what?
I feel decrepit. One of my son-in-laws, who I was trying to live with their family, and we didn't get along at all. And then when I was leaving, my daughter said, "But Mom, if you're actually disabled, we'll certainly take care of you." And my son-in-law said, I said, "You can't say that because your husband, my son-in-law, hates me. How can you say that?" And her husband laughed. And he said, "Well, Rhonda, when you're old, decrepit, and vulnerable, you'll be easier to live with."
Wow.
And I think it's true. It's true.
But I've never had anything that bad said to me. I should look for another place to live. Dad, that's all.
That's why you're living with someone who's decrepit.
Oh, my host right now, who Marty Armstrong, another dedicated widow, she just said, "That's why you're living with another decrepit person." I like to say we mirror each other's decrepitude.
Oh, dear.
Have her come over. I haven't seen her in years.
Oh, she will. You'll
Well,
see
good.
her when I'm moving to I'm to Connecticut. You'll probably see her. But anyway, but
Decrepit
she's not
gnome.
moving. She's in Poughkeepsie, New York. But anyway, it's almost the end of the amount of time we have,
It is?
isn't it?
Well, I have a lot of fun when I'm on the phone with you. It seems like we've just been talking for 15 minutes.
Well, I'm thinking we'll suddenly be cut off, so we should have a closing prayer.
Okay. Shall we say an Our Father together?
Yes, yes.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name.
thy kingdom come,
Come,
thy will be done
done.
on earth as it is. Give us this day our
Our
daily
daily bread,
and forgive us our trespasses.
as we forgive those who trespass against us.
And lead us not into temptation,
But deliver us from evil. Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Well, I'm sorry our time together is already almost over.
What should we talk about next week? Do you have an idea?
How about if we talk about the kinds of books we write?
Okay. I'll make a note of that.
Mm-hmm. But you wrote memoir too, though, right? I write memoir.
Yes.
Yeah. I just started another one with for Sebastian.
Oh, what's it called?
6 feet over.
6 feet over?
Yes,
Really?
Yeah. Or it could be 6 feet above. But,
Oh, 6 feet over instead of 6 feet under, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute. That's cute.
Yeah, with the title. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to relate my life with other people. Like, I've had 2 husbands, both died. With my parents, that sort of thing. And what I talk to them about when I go to the graves.
Oh, that's fascinating. What I talk to them about when I visit their graves.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Oh, I love it. I love it. Mm.
It changes over time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When I first went, when Bill died, Bill's death definitely hit me harder than anything else, because we really became one person. And when he died, I was just devastated. And I would go to the cemetery, but you couldn't get in because of the snow up here in Vermont. Fortunately, he was able to be buried. Up here, they keep him in the freezer until the spring, Fortunately, he died early enough that he was able to go in the ground. But I would go to the fence of the cemetery and talk to him, even though I couldn't get to his grave. So when April came, and it started to thaw, I was actually able to go into the cemetery and to the grave. And so now I go every day, because I know once winter comes, that's it, man.
Okay. Do you hear him talking back to you?
In my mind, I do, but I know he's not really doing that. But I always know.
How do you know he isn't?
Well, my understanding from scripture, and I could be wrong, is that there is a chasm that cannot be superseded, so to speak.
Oh, I don't think so. There's all these saints, especially mystical saints, who heard things from the people in purgatory and in heaven. Mm-hmm. Well, we can discuss that very point next week.
Yeah. Yes. So I go every day now. And if I can't stay long in the morning, I just tell them, I'll be back later this afternoon. And, I just tell them what's going on. And it was unquestionably the worst loss of my life. I mean, it is just, it just devastated me, and still does. But, that's life. But yeah, so I talked to, I told Sebastian, I said, maybe we should just call it I talked to the dead. But that would be a little weird. So 6 feet over. Yep. So.
Well, it needs a subtitle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll figure something out. But that's my new writing project.
Oh, I love it. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, Sebastian did too. So we'll see what happens. But it's, we had a really good life together for almost 17 years. The last year and a half were tough because he got sick. I had cancer in the interim. He took care of me. And then when he got sick, I took care of him. But it was a kind of marriage that fairy tales are made out of.
Oh, Cynthia, that's so precious.
It is. Yep. And I cry all the time. Like I'm just getting teary now. I can't help that.
That's good. That's good.
It was the kind of marriage that fairy tales are made out of.
That's a great grace. So you had you'll talk about your other book about your childhood. You already said a little about it on this, I think. But all right. I look forward to that.
Okie dokie. Well, I will see you next Tuesday at 6. For some reason, I thought it was 6:30. I have no idea why.
You're getting older. Now, next Tuesday, I'll still be here. Then I have two Tuesdays where I'll be with the family and not necessarily able to get on this at all.
Sure.
So cross off the next 2 after next week. But next week I'll be here.
Okay, that's good.
Then we'll keep going later. I love it.
Yeah, so do I. Say hello to Marty. I haven't seen her in ages.
Yeah. Do you want just come over and say hello?
Oh, I'd love to.
Sebastian can take off this part.
Kitty almost knocked me over.
So
there she is.
No, you have to put your face so that it shows.
I'm getting there.
No, you're not.
I see Cynthia.
Hi.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you?
I'm okay.
Way to be.
She's been listening to the whole thing. So
yeah, so I can tell my whole gossip crowd, right? Just gossip.
Sure,
you look great. And you're up in Vermont?
Yes. Yeah, I live here all the time now. I only work at Holy Apostles teaching a couple of online courses. So I'm in unless I have to go down. For a doctor visit or something like that, or to see somebody, a friend or something. But, so I've been up here. Bill and I lived here for 17 years, and I decided when he died, I would stay here permanently because it's our home.
What town are you in?
Springfield.
Oh, Springfield, Vermont. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about a 3-hour drive from Holy Apostles. But it's all highway, so it was a good choice, as far as commuting. But it has all the amenities, basic. We have a couple of restaurants, 2 drugstores, a grocery store. So I mean, it's not like you have to drive 20 miles to get somewhere.
You have a little center of town, wherever you want to call it, right?
And I actually live about a half a mile from that center up a hill. And it's interesting because I'm in the middle of this, what by Vermont standards is an urban place. I don't like to go out at night because we have black bear, we have fox, deer, moose, coyote. I have seen wolf, but not on my land. So I'm very aware of the wildlife. They're usually not around during the day, so I don't go out much at night unless I make a lot of noise and clang things and stuff,
We'll have to bring you down here. We have bears. I haven't seen any lately. And this is in like just a neighborhood type thing, but they're bears and all of the coyotes, foxes. It's so funny because you don't think of this as bear territory. We have deer all the time. And so it's funny. I guess they like it. They're sort of an urban bunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I live, I'm on 4.5 acres. And when I go up my hill, there's a project there. The project is people who are poor. They're fine people. That's the only thing. They're not bad people at all. If you go to the side of the project, there's a place 20 to 30 miles up. You can just keep going for 20 or 30 miles. It's all wilderness. So those they just go through the project and come down my hill, into my yard, and they keep going usually, thank heavens. But I'm just very aware of them, because I know they're.
When my hubby was alive, we used to come up to Vermont to ski, and he graduated from St. Michael's in Winooski Park. Yeah. And so he was crazy about Vermont, but we'd go up to Stowe or some of these places, and we'd spend a week there doing the ski stuff, and it was wonderful memories that go with Vermont. Yeah.
Well, I really like it. For one thing, the house I have is, I was just telling Rhonda the other day, I have 8 rooms. If I tried to have 8 rooms in Connecticut, I'd never be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So I have, I have a big house. I have 3 sheds, 2 of which are 2 stories. I have, I have 4.5 acres. So it's beautiful. I could never afford that in Connecticut. And, yeah.
Are any of your children live near you?
They're all in Connecticut and Rhode Island. Actually, one of them is in Maine. But, kids scatter.
I know.
Yeah. But we do get together, and I get together with Bill's family, too. They're in Connecticut, most of them. I do see them. But, at this point, this is the place for me.
Oh, yes.
And I was concerned initially because it had been the place he loved, so we bought it. But I grew to love it, and now I love it because I remember our life here together, and I don't.
That's huge. Think about it, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a pillow or a leaf, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So yeah, he was a exceptional husband.
You were blessed.
Yeah, I was. I was blessed twice. Both of my husbands were good, but Bill and I really, it could have just been my age also because I was older, but we really did grow into one person. I mean, we would each other's sentences. It was ridiculous. And it was the greatest story, though, of all. When we were dating, he said,
we should have a whole program about our husbands.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
But
I'll join in with that one.
I'll tell you the story, then I'll let you go. So we were talking one night, and he said, well, when we get married, he said, you won't have to work anymore. I'll take care of you. He was... he had been a truck driver, and then he started working for car dealers. And I said, no, I have a career. And he said, he said, what do you do? I said, I'm a professor. And he was like, what? I love it. He had a 4th grade education. He was taken out of school in 4th grade, which they did up here all the time. His father owned a wagon drawn by horses for milk. And one day the father jumped off the back of the milk truck or the milk wagon, broke both his legs. He couldn't work anymore, so he pulled Bill out of work, and he worked doing that, pulling that team and delivering that milk. So he was taken out of school in 4th grade, never went back. But it proved to me, if there's anything in the world that proved to me that education does not necessarily matter. I mean, if you want to, make $1 gazillion, you need it. Yeah. But he was the nicest person and kind and gentle man. Yeah. And same kind of the perfect personality, always ready with a joke if you were depressed, always compassionate if you were depressed, just a great guy. And what he could have done if he had gotten that education, But up here, it's still not unusual. People drop out of school left and right.
Even now.
But he was taken out. He wouldn't have dropped out, but he was taken out because of his father. But but that difference it had no impact at all on our marriage unless he was in the hospital. And if he was in the hospital and the doctor wouldn't listen to me, I'd say, just like you, I'm a doctor, but in a different field. So start talking to me, and
you go, girl.
Yeah.
Well, when I was doing my PhD oral, just before the end, you have an oral exam on your thesis and so forth. This other woman, philosophy professor, said the best benefit of having a PhD is anytime you go anywhere, if you put doctor in front of your name, everybody pays attention to you and helps you.
Yeah. Well, I don't usually use it. But if somebody's going to annoy me or because I'm male and an old one now, or if somebody is not going to listen to my husband, then or me because of his health. So that the last time he was sick, the doctor walked in and he said, "Are you Mrs. Wilson?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm Dr. Toolin-Wilson."
Good for you. Go, girl. I love it. Let them have it.
It
makes a difference. Yeah.
But it does make a difference. But that's scary. What about the women that love their husbands but don't know how to respond? Exactly. And the doctor walks all over them. It's not right. It's still here in this country, even though in theory we have equal rights. So I don't know.
That would be a good topic, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Do we have equal rights? No. Only if you have education and you're bold will you be treated rightly. I believe that.
Well, it's still better. It's better than Auschwitz.
Well, that's true. It was when we were young, but it's not where it should be. We should be received as equal because we are persons. And just because we don't have the right organs doesn't mean we're stupid.
Right.
So we'll call each other sir and see how we get treated. Okay.
Okay. All righty.
Okay. See you next week.
It was a joy seeing you, Cynthia. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
God bless you.
Yeah, you too.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.